You said you were working late at the pack house, David. Luna's voice was a barely audible rasp, stripped of everything but raw devastation. The bedroom door stood open, framing a scene that fractured her reality. David scrambled backward, his eyes wide, the scent of guilt sharp and undeniable in the air. Beside him, her own sister Maya frantically tugged the sheets up, her face flushed. "Luna, wait, it's not—" David choked out, reaching for her. "Don't." The single word cut through the heavy air, final and cold. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just turned away, the sound of her retreating footsteps the only eulogy for the life she thought she had. By dawn, the Luna of the Crescent Moon Pack was gone. 4 years. A blink for a werewolf, an eternity for a shattered heart. The coastal town of Blackwood was a sanctuary forged in salt air and anonymity, far from the suffocating politics of the Crescent Moon Pack. Here, Luna was just Alara, a quiet woman who ran a successful, if understated, apothecary shop near the docks. The scent of dried lavender and sage masked the lingering metallic tang of betrayal that sometimes still haunted her dreams. She wiped down the worn oak counter, the rhythmic motion soothing. The bell above the door chimed, a cheerful sound that felt at odds with the sudden, sharp prickle at the nape of her neck. It wasn't a familiar customer. The energy shifting the air in the small shop was potent, heavy with an authority that set her dormant instincts on edge. Luna didn't look up immediately. She carefully aligned a row of tincture bottles, forcing her breathing to remain slow and even. Just a traveler, she told herself, just passing through. "Excuse me," a deep, resonant voice rumbled. It was a voice that commanded attention, a voice used to being obeyed without question. It was not David's voice, thank the goddess, but it carried a similar, unsettling weight of power. She finally lifted her gaze. The man standing before her filled the narrow space. He was tall, his broad shoulders stretching the fabric of a simple dark sweater. His hair was thick and dark, styled with an effortless carelessness. But it was his eyes that caught her. They were a startling, piercing amber, currently scanning the shelves with a faint look of amusement. "I was told," he began, turning those intense eyes on her, "that this is the only place in Blackwood that carries authentic wolfsbane salve." Luna's heart performed a slow, painful stutter. Wolfsbane. Not a common request in a human town. Not unless you knew what it was truly for. She maintained her composure, her face a carefully constructed mask of polite customer service. "It's a specialized item," she replied, her voice steady. "Most folks around here prefer arnica for muscle aches." He stepped closer to the counter, the sheer physical presence of him overwhelming. "I'm not most folks," he said softly, a hint of a challenge in his tone. "And it's not for muscle aches." He didn't offer a name, and she didn't ask. In her experience, men with that kind of aura were best kept at a distance. She reached under the counter, retrieving a small, dark glass jar. $50, she stated briskly, sliding it across the polished wood. He didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, his gaze dropped to her hands, specifically to the faint, silvery scar that sliced across the back of her left hand. A remnant of a training accident, long before she knew the true meaning of pain. "A nasty scratch," he observed, his voice dropping an octave. "An old wound." "Kitchen accident," she lied smoothly, pulling her hand back. "Will that be all?" He studied her face for a long moment, those amber eyes seeming to strip away the layers of her carefully constructed Alara persona. "For now," he finally said, placing a crisp $50 bill on the counter. He took the jar, his fingers brushing the wood where hers had been just seconds before. "I have a feeling I'll be back, Alara." The way he said the fake name sent a shiver down her spine. It sounded like a promise, or perhaps a threat. As the door chimed behind him, the heavy energy dissipated, leaving Luna gasping for air as if she'd been holding it the entire time. She hurried to the back room, her hands shaking slightly as she locked the door behind her. The sanctuary of Blackwood suddenly felt incredibly fragile. "Mama?" Two small voices piped up from the corner of the room. A boy and a girl. Mirror images of each other with messy dark curls and eyes the exact shade of melted chocolate. They were the reason she ran. The reason she survived. "Everything is fine, my loves," Luna whispered, pulling them into a tight embrace, burying her face in their hair. Everything has to be fine. But as she held her twins, the heirs to a bloodline they knew nothing about, the memory of those amber eyes lingered. He wasn't just a werewolf. He was an alpha. And alphas rarely wandered into human territory without a reason. The peace she had so carefully constructed was cracking, and she didn't know if she was strong enough to survive the fallout a second time. She needed to know who he was, and more importantly, what he wanted in her quiet corner of the world. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the harbor, a thick gray blanket that mirrored the unease settling in Luna's chest. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the brief encounter with a stranger. The scent he left behind, pine, rain, and something fundamentally dominant, was a ghost haunting the apothecary. She busied herself with inventory, trying to ignore the subtle shift in the town's atmosphere. Blackwood was small. News traveled faster than a salt-laden breeze. When Mrs. Gable, the town gossip, bustled into the shop before noon, Luna knew the rumors had begun. "Did you hear, Alara?" Mrs. Gable leaned over the counter, her eyes gleaming with conspiratorial delight. "The old Harrison estate up on the cliffs? It's been bought. Paid in cash, they say. Someone very wealthy, very private." Luna paused in counting chamomile packets. "Is that so?" she murmured, keeping her tone light. The Harrison estate was isolated, heavily wooded, and vast. Perfect for someone who wanted to remain unseen. Perfect for a pack. "Oh yes, a whole team of contractors went up there this morning. Tight-lipped, the lot of them." Mrs. Gable lowered her voice dramatically. "I saw the new owner, too. Down by the docks. Imposing man. Looked like he could snap a mast in two. The description fit the man from yesterday perfectly." The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture Luna desperately wanted to ignore. An alpha, moving into an isolated estate near a human town. It reeked of expansion, or perhaps evasion. After Mrs. Gable departed, Luna closed the shop early. She needed air. She needed to think. Telling the twins, Leo and Lila, they were going for a walk. She headed towards the less populated stretch of the beach, away from the harbor and the prying eyes of the town. The twins ran ahead, their laughter carrying over the sound of the crashing waves. They were oblivious to the tension rolling off their mother in waves. At 4 years old, their world was simple, safe. Luna intended to keep it that way. As they neared a cluster of large rocks, Luna noticed a figure standing perfectly still near the water's edge, gazing out at the turbulent sea. The broad shoulders, the dark coat. It was him, the alpha from the shop. Panic flared hot and bright in her chest. She grabbed the twins' hands, intending to turn back, to disappear into the tree line before he noticed them. But the wind betrayed her, shifting suddenly, carrying her scent directly to him. He turned slowly, his posture relaxed, but completely alert. The distance between them was significant. Yet Luna felt the impact of his amber gaze as a physical blow. He didn't move towards them, simply watched. Mama, who is that man?" Leo asked, tugging on her hand. Just a stranger, Leo. Come on, let's go back. It's getting cold. She forced her voice to remain calm, steering them away. She didn't look back until they reached the edge of the woods. When she did, he was still standing there, watching their retreat. The sense of being hunted, a feeling she hadn't experienced in 4 years, settled heavily in her bones. That night, after the twins were asleep, Luna sat by the window in their small apartment above the shop. The Harrison estate was a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. She traced the faint scar on her hand, a nervous habit. She couldn't run again. Blackwood was their home. The twins were happy here, safe from the toxic legacy of the Crescent Moon Pack. But she couldn't ignore the threat this new alpha presented. If he discovered what she was, who she was, the delicate illusion of Alara would shatter. She needed more information. She needed to know if he was a rogue, a solitary alpha, or the vanguard of a new pack. The next day, she made a decision. She packed a small basket with a selection of herbal teas and a fresh jar of the wolfsbane salve. It was a risk, a calculated maneuver to gauge his intentions. She drove her old truck up the winding road to the Harrison estate. The massive iron gates were open, a silent invitation or a display of arrogance. She parked near the imposing stone house, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Before she could even reach for the basket, the front door opened. He stepped out, dressed in worn jeans and a dark Henley, looking less like an imposing alpha and more like a man doing renovations. But the aura of power remained undiminished. He walked towards her truck, his steps measured and deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "I didn't expect a delivery," he said, his voice carrying easily over the distance. Luna stepped out of the truck, clutching the basket tightly. "A welcome gift," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "For the new neighbor." He looked at the basket, then back at her, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. "Wolfsbane and tea. An interesting combination. I figured you might need both, depending on what kind of renovations you're doing." She countered smoothly. He closed the distance between them, taking the basket from her hands. His fingers brushed hers again, a brief, electrifying contact. "I appreciate the gesture, Alara," he said, the name sounding even more like a challenge than before. "I'm Kalen." Kalen. The name didn't ring any bells, but the lack of a pack name was telling. A solitary alpha, then, or one who preferred to keep his affiliations hidden. "Well, Kalen," Luna said, taking a step back towards her truck. "Welcome to Blackwood. I hope you find what you're looking for." As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Kalen was standing in the driveway, watching her leave. The game had begun, and Luna knew she was playing for the highest stakes possible. Her children's safety. The drive back to town felt entirely too short. Luna's hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Kalen's presence had been an assault on her senses. The raw power rolling off him, the sharp scent of pine and something distinctly predatory, and the impossible heat of his brief touch. He knew. She felt it in the marrow of her bones. He might not know who she was, but he knew she wasn't just Alara, the human apothecary. The wolfsbane was a test, and she had walked right into it. The rest of the week passed in a tense blur. Luna kept the twins close, restricting their playtime to the small fenced yard behind the shop. Leo and Lila, sensing their mother's unease, grew unusually quiet, their large brown eyes watching her every move. On Friday afternoon, the bell above the shop door jingled. Luna braced herself, expecting the imposing frame of the alpha to fill the doorway. Instead, a young man stepped inside. He had an easy smile and messy blonde hair, but the subtle grace of his movements marked him as a wolf. A beta, perhaps, or a high-ranking enforcer. "Afternoon," he said, his voice cheerful, entirely devoid of the crushing authority Kaylin possessed. "Are you Alara?" "I am," Luna replied, wiping her hands on her apron. She kept her posture relaxed, burying her wolf deep beneath layers of forced calm. "How can I help you?" "I'm Jax," he said, extending a hand. Luna hesitated a fraction of a second before taking it. His grip was firm, his skin warm. No spark, no predatory challenge. Just a polite greeting. "Kaylin sent me. He said to tell you the salve worked wonders on his renovations." A muscle feathered in Luna's jaw. Renovations. "I'm glad to hear it," she managed to say evenly. "He also sent this," Jax continued, placing a small, unmarked envelope on the counter. "Said it was for the tea." Before Luna could refuse, Jax offered a two-finger salute and headed for the door. "Nice shop you got here, Alara. Smells good. Peaceful." He stepped out, the bell chiming a cheerful goodbye that mocked the sudden pounding of Luna's heart. She stared at the envelope for a long time. It felt heavy, laden with unspoken implications. Finally, her curiosity overriding her caution, she sliced it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cardstock, bearing a handwritten note in dark, aggressive script. The tea was adequate. The salve was exceptional. "We should discuss a continuous supply. Dinner, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Kay." It wasn't a request. It was a command disguised as an invitation. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Dinner with an alpha in his territory. It was madness. It was suicide. If he pushed her, if her wolf reacted to his dominance, her cover would be blown. But to refuse outright was equally dangerous. Defying an alpha was a surefire way to draw his complete, undivided attention. She spent the night pacing the small living room, the twins asleep in the next room. She thought of David. The memory was a dull ache now, not the sharp agony it once had been. She remembered the suffocating politics of the Crescent Moon Pack, the constant maneuvering, the expectation that she would be a silent, obedient Luna. She had escaped that. She had built a life for herself, for Leo and Lila. She wouldn't let an arrogant alpha strip it away. By morning, she had a plan. It was risky, incredibly foolish, but it was the only way to maintain control. She wouldn't go to the estate. She would change the terms of the engagement. She found Jax down by the docks later that morning, helping a local fisherman secure a line. He looked surprised to see her. "Alara," he greeted, wiping sweat from his brow. "Everything okay?" "Tell Kaylin I'll meet him," Luna said, her voice brooking no argument. "But not at the estate, the Blackwood Tavern, 8 o'clock. Jax raised an eyebrow, a slow grin spreading across his face. "The tavern? You sure? It's a bit rustic." "It's public," Luna countered, her gaze unwavering. "Tell him." She turned and walked away, her spine straight. Let the alpha see that she wasn't easily cowed. Let him see that Alara had claws of her own. The Blackwood Tavern was exactly as Jax described. Rustic. It smelled of stale beer, fried fish, and the briny scent of the harbor. It was crowded, noisy, and perfectly human. The ideal neutral ground. Luna arrived precisely at 8, wearing a simple dark dress and her hair pulled back in a severe knot. She wanted to project professionalism, a stark contrast to the vulnerability she felt. She spotted Kaylin immediately. He was sitting at a corner booth, nursing a dark amber liquid. Even sitting down, he dominated the space. The harsh lighting of the tavern cast long shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his jaw and the intense, unnerving color of his eyes. He watched her approach, his expression unreadable. He didn't stand, but a subtle shift in his posture indicated he was fully focused on her. "You're brave, Ilara," he murmured as she slid into the booth opposite him. "Or very foolish." "I prefer practical," she replied, keeping her voice low. "If we're discussing a business arrangement, a neutral location seems appropriate." He leaned back, studying her. The silence stretched between them, thick with unsaid words. Luna forced herself to hold his gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. Her wolf, usually dormant, scratched at the edges of her consciousness, reacting to the challenge in his stare. "Business," he finally said, the word rolling off his tongue with a hint of amusement. "Is that what we're discussing? You mentioned a continuous supply of salve," Luna reminded him, keeping her tone strictly professional. "I need to know the volume required to ensure I have the necessary ingredients." Kaelin chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated in her chest. "You play the part well." "I'm not playing a part," she said sharply, her carefully constructed mask slipping for a fraction of a second. His eyes narrowed, honing in on that momentary lapse. "No? A human apothecary who expertly crafts a salve that masks the scent of a shifting wolf? A woman who looks at an alpha and doesn't flinch?" He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, invading her space. "You're hiding something, Ilara, and I despise secrets." Luna's heart hammered against her ribs, but she held her ground. "Everyone has secrets, Kaelin. It's what keeps life interesting, not when those secrets reside in my territory." The amusement was gone, replaced by the cold, hard edge of a leader assessing a potential threat. "I moved my pack here for peace. I won't tolerate unknown variables." So, he did have a pack. The information was crucial, but it didn't ease her anxiety. "I'm not a threat to you or your pack," Luna stated firmly. "I run a shop. I keep to myself." "Then why the wolfsbane?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Why the tension every time I come near you?" Luna took a slow, deep breath. The lie had to be perfect. "I know what you are," she admitted, letting a flicker of genuine fear show in her eyes. It wasn't entirely a lie. She was afraid of him. "I've encountered your kind before. It didn't end well." She deliberately let her gaze drop to the scarred back of her hand. Kaelin's eyes followed her movement. The harshness in his expression softened just a fraction. He reached across the table, his large hand covering hers. The contact was shocking, a jolt of electricity that shot straight to her core. "I am not whoever hurt you," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "My pack does not harm humans." Luna wanted to pull away, but his grip, though light, was firm. The warmth of his hand was a stark contrast to the cold fear gripping her heart. He believed the lie. He thought she was a traumatized human. It was a dangerous game, playing on his protective instincts, but it was working. "I need to be sure," she whispered, looking up at him through her lashes. "You have my word," Kaelin promised, his amber eyes locked onto hers. The intensity of his gaze was overwhelming, a silent vow that felt more binding than any written contract. He slowly released her hand, the absence of his touch leaving her skin tingling. "Now," he said, his tone shifting back to business, though the dangerous edge was gone. "About that salve." They spent the next hour negotiating terms. Luna kept the conversation strictly focused on quantities and delivery schedules, desperate to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Kaelin agreed to her prices without argument, his focus seemingly more on her than the details of the arrangement. When it was time to leave, Kaelin insisted on walking her to her truck. The night air was cool, the harbor quiet save for the gentle lapping of waves against the docks. They reached her old truck, the silence between them less hostile now, but still heavy with unspoken questions. "Thank you for the drink," Luna said, fumbling slightly with her keys. "I'll see you soon, Ilara," Kaylin replied, stepping back to give her space. She nodded, not trusting her voice. As she started the engine, she watched him walk away, his dark figure blending into the shadows. She had survived the encounter. But the victory felt hollow. She had lied to an alpha, manipulated his instincts. The tangled web she was weaving was becoming increasingly complex, and Luna knew that if she tripped, the fall would be devastating. She drove home. The image of Kaylin's amber eyes burned into her mind, a constant reminder of the dangerous game she was playing. Saturday mornings in Blackwood were usually a predictable rhythm of local fishermen buying ginger root for sea nausea and elderly women seeking joint relief. Luna welcomed the mundane routine. It grounded her, providing a fragile barrier against the lingering anxiety from her meeting at the tavern. She was carefully grinding dried eucalyptus leaves in a heavy stone mortar, the sharp, medicinal scent filling the air. When the shop bell chimed, Luna didn't need to look up to know who had crossed the threshold. The atmospheric pressure in the small room shifted, growing instantly heavier, as if a storm front had just rolled off the ocean and into her apothecary. The faint, masculine scent of pine, rain, and raw power cut through the eucalyptus effortlessly. "Good morning, Ilara." Kaylin's voice resonated, rich and low. She paused the pestle, taking a steadying breath before looking up. He stood just inside the doorway, dressed in a charcoal gray Henley and dark denim that did nothing to hide the athletic, heavily muscled build of an apex predator. The morning light caught the amber in his eyes, making them glow with an unsettling warmth. "Kaylin," she greeted, wiping her hands on a linen towel. "You're early. The first batch of the salve isn't scheduled for delivery until Monday. I found myself in town," he replied, walking slowly toward the counter. His gaze swept over the meticulously organized shelves, but Luna could feel his attention anchored firmly on her. "I thought I would save Jax the trip, and perhaps see how the local apothecary is faring." "The apothecary is perfectly fine," she said, keeping her tone brisk. She moved to the wooden cabinet behind the counter, reaching for the prepared jars. "I appreciate the efficiency, however." As she turned back, setting a small crate of dark glass jars on the polished wood, a sudden clatter echoed from the back room. Luna froze. "Mama, Leo took my blue crayon." Lila's indignant, high-pitched voice rang out, followed by the rapid patter of small feet. Before Luna could intercept them, the heavy curtain separating the back room from the shop pushed aside. Leo tumbled out, clutching a stubby blue wax crayon to his chest, with Lila hot on his heels. Luna's heart plummeted into her stomach. She moved instinctively, stepping out from behind the counter to block Kaylin's view, but she was too slow. The twins, noticing the massive stranger, stopped dead in their tracks in the center of the worn rug. For a terrifying, agonizing second, the shop was completely silent. Luna watched Kaylin. Werewolves were territorial, aggressive by nature, and alphas were the most volatile of all. Human children were fragile, easily broken things in their eyes. But Kaylin didn't bare his teeth. The dangerous, sharp edge of his aura suddenly muted, retracting so swiftly it left a vacuum in the air. He slowly lowered himself, dropping into a crouch until he was at eye level with the 4-year-olds. "Well," Kaylin murmured, his voice incredibly soft, devoid of the command it usually held. "Who might you two be?" Luna held her breath, her muscles coiled tight, ready to throw herself between them if necessary. "Leo, Lila," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts. "Come here, please." They didn't move. Usually shy around strangers, The twins stood rooted to the spot, staring at Kaylin with wide, chocolate-brown eyes. To Luna's absolute horror, Leo took a hesitant step forward. Human children inherently feared predators. But Leo wasn't entirely human. Deep within his tiny, unshifted body, the dormant wolf instinct recognized the authority radiating from the man before him. It wasn't fear holding the boy captivated. It was a primal, magnetic pull toward an alpha. "I'm Leo," the boy announced softly, his chin lifting slightly. "And that's Lila." She was being bossy. Kaylin let out a low, genuine chuckle that vibrated in the floorboards. "Is that right? My betas tell me I can be quite bossy as well. It's a heavy burden." He tilted his head, his amber eyes scanning Leo's face, then shifting to Lila. Luna watched, paralyzed, as Kaylin's brow furrowed slightly. He wasn't just looking at them. He was studying them, searching for something. The wolfsbane she laced into their daily oatmeal masked any overt scent. But could an alpha of his caliber sense something deeper? An echo of the bloodline? "They are yours," Kaylin stated, looking up at Luna. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Luna managed to say, quickly closing the distance and gently placing her hands on their small shoulders, pulling them back against her legs. "My twins." Kaylin stood up slowly, towering over them once again. The softness vanished, replaced by contemplative intensity. "They don't have your eyes." The observation hit her like a physical blow. They had David's eyes, the dark, expressive eyes of the crescent moon beta who had broken her. "They take after their father," Luna replied smoothly, the lie tasting like ash on her tongue. "He passed away before they were born." A shadow crossed Kaylin's face. Sympathy or suspicion? "I see. They are remarkably brave, Ilara. Most human children would be intimidated by a stranger my size. We live in a rough harbor town." She deflected quickly, ushering the children back toward the curtain. "Go finish your drawing, loves. Mama is working." Once the curtain fell shut, the silence returned, thick and suffocating. Kaylin moved back to the counter, pulling a thick roll of cash from his pocket. He counted out the exact amount for the salve, placing the bills neatly on the wood. "They are beautiful children," he said quietly, his gaze locked on the spot where they had disappeared. "Thank you," Luna replied, desperate for him to leave. He picked up the small crate, lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "I will see you soon, Ilara. Have a peaceful weekend." As the bell chimed his departure, Luna sank against the counter, her legs shaking uncontrollably. He hadn't noticed their true nature. He couldn't have. But the way he looked at them, the unseen thread of connection pulling at him, terrified her more than any outright threat. The walls of her sanctuary were holding, but the foundation was beginning to crack. By Thursday, the coastal weather had turned vicious. A sudden, violent squall blew in from the Atlantic, battering Blackwood with horizontal rain and howling winds. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, casting the town in a gloomy, premature twilight. Luna had flipped the closed sign an hour early. The storm made the town feel claustrophobic, the pounding rain a constant drumbeat against her frayed nerves. Since Kaylin's interaction with the twins, she had been jumping at shadows, checking the locks twice, and staring out the window into the fog. She was in the back room, helping Lila untangle a knot in her dark hair, when she felt it. It wasn't the heavy, localized pressure of Kaylin. It was a sharp, localized spike of adrenaline that burned the back of her throat. It smelled like stagnant marsh water and rotting leaves. Crescent moon. Luna dropped the comb. The plastic clattered loudly against the wooden floorboards. "Mama?" Lila asked, looking back with a frown. "Hush, sweetie," Luna whispered, her voice tight, Stay right here with Leo. Do not make a sound. She crept toward the heavy curtain, leaving the back room entirely dark. She parted the fabric just a fraction of an inch, peering through the gloom of the apothecary toward the front window. The street outside was deserted, rivers of rainwater rushing down the cobblestones. Then, a figure stepped out from the narrow alley across the street. He was wearing a dark, heavy slicker, the hood pulled up to obscure his face. But Luna didn't need to see his face. The aggressive, arrogant posture, the way he scanned the buildings not like a man seeking shelter, but a hunter seeking prey. It was unmistakable. It was Silas, one of David's top trackers. Bile rose in Luna's throat. She pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. How? How had they found her? 4 years of perfect hiding, of masking her scent with bitter herbs and living a ghost's life, unraveled in a single afternoon. Silas stood on the opposite sidewalk, his head tilted back slightly as if tasting the wind. The rain was washing away most scents, but if he got close enough to the shop, if the wind shifted just right, he stepped off the curb, moving purposefully toward the apothecary. Panic, absolute and blinding, consumed her. She had to run, out the back door, into the woods. But the woods belonged to Kaylin now. She was trapped between a pack that wanted her head and an alpha who tolerated no secrets. Just as Silas reached the center of the flooded street, headlights cut through the gloom. A massive, matte black SUV turned the corner sharply, its tires hissing angrily against the wet asphalt. The vehicle didn't just drive past. It swerved, cutting off Silas's path to the apothecary, the heavy grille stopping mere inches from the tracker's legs. Luna held her breath, her fingers gripping the curtain so tightly her knuckles popped. The driver's side door of the SUV opened into the driving rain. Kaylin stepped out. He didn't bother with a coat. The rain instantly soaked his dark sweater, plastering it to the broad expanse of his chest. He didn't rush. He simply stood by the open door of his vehicle, an immovable mountain of dominance in the storm. Even through the thick glass of the window, Luna could feel the explosive clash of auras. Silas recoiled, his hand instinctively dropping toward his hip. It was a foolish, fatal mistake. Kaylin didn't yell over the storm. He didn't have to. He took one slow, deliberate step forward. Luna couldn't hear the words exchanged, but the body language was a masterclass in primal hierarchy. Kaylin's posture was relaxed, but lethal, a king confronting a trespasser. Silas, initially defensive, suddenly seemed to shrink. The tracker's shoulders hunched, his head lowered in a forced, undeniable display of submission. Whatever Kaylin said, it broke Silas's resolve instantly. The tracker took 3 steps back, completely abandoning his path to the apothecary, and turned, practically fleeing back into the shadows of the alley. Kaylin watched the alley for a long moment, ensuring the threat was gone. Then, slowly, he turned his head and looked directly at the apothecary window, directly at the exact spot where Luna was hiding behind the curtain. He knew she was watching. He knew she was terrified. He slammed the SUV doors shut, walked through the torrential downpour, and tested the handle of the shop door. Finding it locked, he knocked. 3 heavy, authoritative thuds against the glass. Luna's mind raced. If she ignored him, he could break the door down. If she opened it, she was inviting the devil inside. Swallowing her terror, she hurried back to the twins. "Stay here. Do not come out," she ordered, her voice trembling. She walked to the front door, her hands shaking violently as she undid the deadbolt. She pulled the door open just enough to see his face. Water dripped from his dark hair, trailing down the sharp angles of his jaw. His amber eyes were alight with a dangerous, protective fire. "He's gone," Kaylin stated flatly, his voice a low rumble over the rain. I don't know who you mean. Luna lied, her voice cracking. Kalen stepped forward, forcing the door open wider, his massive frame crowding her into the entryway. The scent of ozone, rain, and furious alpha flooded the room. He reached out, his large, calloused hand gripping her upper arm. His touch wasn't painful, but it was inescapable. He pulled her slightly closer, forcing her to look up into his blazing eyes. "Stop lying to me, Alara." He growled softly, the sound vibrating in her very bones. That wasn't a stray dog looking for shelter. That was a crescent moon tracker. Luna froze, her heart stopping in her chest. "And they weren't scouting territory," Kalen continued, his gaze piercing through her defenses, stripping her bare. "They were tracking someone they lost." He stepped fully into the shop, kicking the door shut behind him with a definitive click, locking them inside. "You didn't run from a wolf, Ilara. You ran from that pack. Now, you are going to tell me exactly why a crescent moon tracker is hunting a human apothecary in my territory." The apothecary felt entirely too small. The storm raged outside, throwing sheets of water against the storefront glass. But inside, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Kalen stood between Luna and the only exit, a dripping, immovable mountain of alpha dominance. The scent of rain and ozone radiating from him was laced with a sharp, demanding edge that made Luna's dormant wolf stir restlessly. "I don't know what you're talking about," Luna repeated, though her voice lacked conviction. She pressed her back against the wooden counter, creating as much distance between them as the narrow space allowed. "I run an apothecary. That man was just a creep looking for—" "Do not insult my intelligence, Ilara." Kalen interrupted, his voice a low, vibrating growl that settled heavy in her chest. He closed the distance in 2 long strides, stopping just inches from her. "Silas is a tracker, one of the best the Crescent Moon Pack has. He wasn't looking for herbs, and he wasn't looking for shelter. He was looking for a ghost." Luna swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the heavy curtain that shielded the back room. She had to keep him quiet. She had to keep him away from the twins. "If you know who he is," Luna said, forcing her chin up, "then you know you should stay out of it. Crescent Moon business is their own." Kalen's eyes flared, the amber rings glowing with sudden, intense heat. "Nothing happens in my territory without my permission, especially not a hunt." He reached out, his knuckles grazing the wood of the counter beside her hip, caging her in. "You reek of fear, but beneath the bitter herbs and the human facade, there is something else. Something you've buried very deep." He leaned closer, his nose brushing the shell of her ear. The heat of his skin was a stark contrast to the chilled, damp air of the shop. He inhaled slowly, deeply. Luna squeezed her eyes shut, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had bathed in wolfsbane soap. She had drank the tea. But against an alpha of his caliber, standing this close, it wasn't enough. "You aren't human," he murmured, his breath fanning across her neck, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "Your wolf is suppressed, dormant. But she is there." He pulled back slightly, forcing her to meet his intense gaze. "Who are you running from? David?" Hearing the name spoken aloud after 4 years felt like a physical strike. Luna flinched, the color draining from her face. It was the only confirmation Kalen needed. "Why is the beta of the Crescent Moon Pack hunting a rogue in my town?" Kalen demanded, though the anger in his voice was suddenly laced with something akin to confusion. "He's not the beta anymore," Luna whispered, the truth finally tearing its way out of her throat. The walls were crumbling, and the sheer exhaustion of carrying the lie was overwhelming her. He took over as Alpha 3 years ago. after I left. Kalen's brow furrowed, his mind visibly racing to connect the scattered pieces of the puzzle. David took the alpha title, but he was mated. The entire werewolf community knew he found his fated mate right before his ascension. Kalen paused, his eyes widening infinitesimally as he stared down at the woman cowering against her own counter. The mousy brown hair, the severe clothing, the scent masked by bitter herbs. It was all a disguise. Goddess above. Kalen breathed, stepping back as if he had been burned. You aren't Ilara. My name is Luna, she said, her voice shaking but defiant. She crossed her arms over her chest, trying to hold her fracturing composure together. I was his mate. Silence stretched between them, heavier than the storm outside. The revelation hung in the air, shifting the entire dynamic of the room. She wasn't just a runaway. She was a Luna, the highest-ranking female in werewolf society, holding a status that commanded absolute respect. To abandon a mate was scandalous. For a Luna to vanish on the eve of her alpha's ascension was unheard of. You ran from a mate bond, Kalen said, his tone a mixture of awe and reprimand. To a wolf, the bond was sacred. Why? Because the bond is a biological joke. Luna spat, the old bitter anger flaring to life. I came home early from the pack hospital. I found him in our bed with my younger sister. The reprimand vanished from Kalen's face, replaced instantly by a cold, terrifying fury. The air pressure in the room dropped so fast, Luna's ears popped. Betrayal of a mate was the ultimate sin in their world, punishable by death in many traditional packs. He defiled the bond, Kalen stated, his hands curling into massive fists at his sides. The predatory edge to his aura returned. But this time, it wasn't directed at her. It was directed outward, toward the alley where Silas had fled. I left that night, Luna continued, her voice gaining strength. I rejected him in my heart, changed my name, and disappeared. I wanted nothing to do with him, his pack, or the politics of our kind. I just wanted peace. Kalen looked at her, truly looked at her, seeing past the disguise to the iron-willed woman beneath. A Luna doesn't just disappear, Luna. The pack magic is tied to you. And more importantly, David's pride is tied to you. A jilted alpha is a dangerous thing. I've hidden perfectly for 4 years, she argued, gesturing to the shop. Until you showed up and the tracker followed. The tracker didn't follow me, Kalen corrected sharply. He followed the scent of a bloodline. Before Luna could process his words, the heavy curtain to the back room parted. Mama? Leo stood in the doorway, clutching his blue crayon. His dark, chocolate-brown eyes, David's eyes, darted from his mother to the massive, wet stranger. Lila peeked out from behind her brother, holding onto his shirt. Kalen turned his head slowly. He looked at the twins, and then back to Luna, his amber eyes burning with a sudden, terrifying realization. They aren't just your children, Luna, Kalen said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. They are his heirs. The word echoed in the small shop, ringing with the finality of a judge's gavel. Heirs. Luna moved instantly, stepping between Kalen and the children. Her maternal instinct completely overrode her fear of the alpha before her. They are mine, she hissed, her dormant wolf pushing against its restraints, ready to bare teeth and claws. David doesn't know about them. He didn't know I was pregnant when I left. But he suspects. Kalen countered smoothly, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. He did not step closer. He recognized a mother defending her young, and even an alpha king knew better than to push that boundary. A tracker like Silas doesn't stumble into Blackwood by accident. If David knows you're alive, he's looking for you. If he finds out about the twins, he will tear this town apart to take them. He can't have them, Luna said, her voice cracking as she reached back, blindly finding Leo's hand and squeezing it. They are human. They haven't shown a single sign of shifting. They don't belong in that violent world. Kalen's gaze softened as he looked at the children hiding behind their mother's legs. They are 4 years old, Luna. The wolf doesn't wake until puberty. But the bloodline is there. I felt it the moment I walked into this shop. He turned away from them, pacing the short length of the counter. The water from his soaked clothes was leaving dark droplets on the floorboards. The storm outside continued to howl, rattling the glass panes. You need to pack, Kalen ordered, stopping abruptly and turning back to her. Luna blinked, thrown by the sudden command. Excuse me? I'm not going anywhere. My business is here. Our life is here. Your life is currently a target. Kalen snapped, his patience fraying. Silas ran, but he didn't leave town. He's reporting back to David right now. By tomorrow night, Crescent Moon enforcers will surround Blackwood. They will take you, and they will take your children. Panic clawed at Luna's throat. She knew he was right. David was relentless, driven by ego and a desperate need for control. If he knew he had heirs, pure blood heirs from his true mate, he would stop at nothing. I can run, Luna said frantically, her eyes darting around the shop. I have cash saved up. I can pack the truck and head north, into the Canadian territories. They won't look for us there. You won't make it past the county line, Kalen stated flatly. You are a single female with 2 pups. You have no pack protection. You are entirely vulnerable. Then what do you suggest I do? She cried out, the frustration and terror finally breaking through her composed facade. Just wait here for them to kick my door in? Kalen stepped toward her, stopping just out of arm's reach. He looked down into her tear-filled eyes, his own amber gaze steady and resolute. You come with me, he said. Luna stared at him, stunned. To the estate? It's not just an estate, Kalen corrected gently. It's a fortress. My pack is small, but we are elite. The wards on that property were cast by the strongest witches in the region. No Crescent Moon wolf can set foot on my land without my express invitation. You want me to move into your territory? Luna asked, shaking her head slowly. To trade one alpha's cage for another. A flash of genuine hurt crossed Kalen's face, quickly masked by stoicism. I am not David, he said, his voice quiet but incredibly firm. I am not offering you a cage, Luna. I am offering you sanctuary. As a guest. You will have your own wing, your own space. The children will be safe. Why? Luna demanded, searching his face for the hidden catch. In their world, nothing was given for free. Why would you risk a war with the Crescent Moon Pack for a stranger? Kalen looked at her for a long, heavy moment. His eyes traced the delicate line of her jaw, the stubborn set of her shoulders, and the fierce protective stance she held over her children. Because a king does not allow rogues to hunt innocent women and children in his lands, Kalen said softly. The title hit Luna like a physical blow. A king. There was only one Alpha King in the Northern Territories. A legendary figure rumored to be ruthless, reclusive, and impossibly powerful. He had united the splintered Northern Packs a decade ago and then vanished into self-imposed exile, leading from the shadows. You're Kalen Vance, Luna breathed, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief. The King of the North. I prefer Kalen, he replied with a slight, self-deprecating shrug. He gestured to the back room. The storm is providing cover, but it won't last forever. Pack whatever you and the children need. Leave the rest. I will have Jack secure the shop in the morning. Luna looked down at Leo and Lila. They were staring up at her, waiting for her to tell them everything was okay. She looked around the apothecary, the sanctuary she had built with her own 2 hands, the life she had scraped together from the ruins of her broken heart. To leave it meant stepping back into the world she despised. But to stay meant losing her children. It was no choice at all. "Okay," Luna whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. She looked back up at the Alpha King, trusting him not because she wanted to, but because she had to. "Okay, we'll go with you." Kalen gave a single, sharp nod. The tension in his shoulders relaxed slightly, though the predatory alertness in his eyes remained. 15 minutes, Luna, and then we disappear." The drive to the estate was a blur of driving rain and suffocating silence. Luna sat in the passenger seat of the heavy SUV, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. In the back, the twins, exhausted by the sudden upheaval and the emotional toll of the evening, had fallen asleep against each other. Kalen drove with a relaxed, single-handed grip on the steering wheel, his amber eyes fixed on the treacherous, winding road. The air inside the cabin was thick with his scent, a comforting blend of pine and rain that subconsciously urged Luna's frayed nerves to settle. He had kept his word. He hadn't asked any more questions, allowing her the space to process the collapse of her carefully constructed life. As they passed through the massive iron gates of the Harrison estate, Luna realized Mrs. Gable's gossip hadn't done the place justice. It wasn't just a house. It was a compound. High stone walls, practically invisible from the main road, encircled the property. Discreetly placed security cameras and the subtle, shifting shadows of patrol guards moving through the tree line spoke of absolute, unyielding security. Kalen parked near a side entrance. Jax was already there, holding a massive umbrella. He looked at Luna, all traces of his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by the sharp, serious focus of an enforcer preparing for a siege. "Get them inside," Kalen instructed softly, stepping out into the rain. Luna gathered the sleeping twins, her muscles aching in protest. She followed Jax into the house, stepping into a warm, expansive foyer that smelled of wood smoke and old leather. It was grand, but it didn't feel cold. It felt lived in. It felt safe. Before she could fully take in her surroundings, the heavy oak door opened again, and Kalen stepped inside. He was followed by another wolf, an older man with silver at his temples and a grim expression. "Report," Kalen commanded, stripping off his soaked jacket. "Silas made it to the county line," the older wolf said, casting a brief, respectful glance at Luna. David was already mobilizing a strike team when the tracker called in. "They are currently parked 3 miles from our southern border. 24 enforcers, minimum. David is demanding an immediate parley." Luna's breath hitched. 24 enforcers. David was bringing the full, violent weight of the Crescent Moon Pack down on Blackwood, all for the sake of his bruised ego. "He claims we are harboring a dangerous rogue who stole pack property," the man continued, his lip curling in disgust at the phrasing. "He threatens to breach the border if she isn't turned over by midnight. He called my children property," Luna whispered, the terror suddenly vanishing, replaced by a cold, blinding, maternal fury. She carefully handed the sleeping twins to a female Omega, who had quietly appeared from the hallway, offering a reassuring smile. Once the children were safely out of the room, Luna turned to Kalen. "I won't let him take them. I'll fight him myself before I let him touch them." Kalen crossed the room, stopping right in front of her. The sheer magnitude of his presence grounded her raging emotions. He reached out, his warm, calloused knuckles gently brushing the tense line of her jaw. "You don't have to fight him, Luna," Kalen said, his voice a low, soothing rumble that vibrated with absolute certainty. "You are not a rogue, and you are no longer alone." He turned to the older wolf. "Connect me to David." Use the main pack frequency. I want every wolf within 50 miles to hear this. Jax hurried to a communications console in the adjoining study. A moment later, the static hiss of a secure radio line filled the room, followed by a voice Luna hadn't heard in 4 years. "This is Alpha David of the Crescent Moon." The voice spat out, laced with arrogant entitlement and barely contained rage. "You are harboring a fugitive. Turn Alara over immediately, or we will cross your borders and take her by force." Luna closed her eyes, a shudder running through her. The sound of his voice brought back the sting of betrayal, the image of her sister in their bed. Kalen stepped up to the microphone. When he spoke, he didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice carried the crushing, undeniable weight of a monarch. "This is Kalen Vance," he stated, the words chilling the air in the room. "And you are currently threatening an act of war against the Northern Court." Total silence echoed over the radio. Luna could perfectly picture the blood draining from David's face. King Kalen," David stammered, the arrogant alpha suddenly sounding like a frightened pup. I was unaware this was your territory. But the woman, she is a Crescent Moon rogue. She abandoned her pack." "The woman," Kalen interrupted, his tone turning lethally sharp, "is Luna. And she is no rogue. She is under my direct, personal protection. She and her children have been granted permanent sanctuary within the Northern Court. They are untouchable. She is my mate," David protested, desperation bleeding into his voice. "Those children are my heirs." Kalen's eyes flashed a brilliant, violent amber. "You severed that bond the moment you defiled it, David. You have no mate. You have no heirs here. If a single Crescent Moon wolf sets a paw across my border, I will not just kill them. I will march south and dismantle your pack entirely. Are we clear?" The silence that followed was heavy, fraught with the realization of a complete and total defeat. To challenge an alpha was one thing. To challenge the Alpha King meant absolute annihilation. "We are clear, Your Majesty," David finally choked out, the submission bitter and absolute. "We are retreating." The radio clicked off. Luna stood rooted to the floor, her mind spinning. It was over. Just like that, the nightmare that had chased her for 4 years was banished by a few spoken words. David would never risk his life or his alpha title to cross Kalen. Kalen turned back to her, the lethal edge fading from his posture, leaving behind the quiet, steady strength she was coming to rely on. "He won't bother you again," Kalen promised softly. Tears, hot and fast, finally spilled over Luna's eyelashes. The sheer exhaustion of running, of hiding, crashed down on her all at once. Her knees buckled. Kalen moved instantaneously, catching her before she hit the floor. He pulled her against his broad chest, wrapping his strong arms securely around her. She buried her face in his sweater, breathing in the scent of pine and rain, finally allowing herself to break, knowing that for the first time in years, someone strong enough was there to catch the pieces. "You're safe, Luna," he murmured into her hair, holding her tight. "You are finally safe." The storm eventually broke, giving way to a brilliant, unclouded dawn over the northern cliffs. For the first time in 4 years, Luna did not look over her shoulder. The apothecary in Blackwood remained closed, but the woman who ran it had finally stopped running. Within the fortified walls of the Alpha King's estate, surrounded by ancient pines and newfound allies, Luna and her twins found a true sanctuary. The scars of the Crescent Moon pack would slowly fade, replaced by the quiet strength of a mother who had fought the darkness and won, and the slow-burning promise of a romance built on absolute trust and mutual respect. Thank you for reading this story. If you enjoyed Luna and Kalen's dramatic journey, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling romance fiction.